Welcome to Excoundrel's second follow-up PowerPoint presentation on what Wild Rift needs to fix. And I think there have been a lot of great videos on this. Hell's Devil kind of sparked a lot of the conversation. Assassin Dave, I think, started things off especially. And then Darkbreaker also added his thoughts. There's been Shimbu popping in. I made a video on it the other day that was a little bit more business orientated. But I do think that I didn't give enough attention to the genuine things in the game that need to be fixed. And that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to talk about the genuine issues that are affecting Wild Rift and how that influences things like marketing down the line. This is all my personal opinion. I have absolutely no idea what goes on at Riot. So I'm just kind of using my own viewpoint to formulate some reasons. But I want to talk about things that I think are genuine issues, and I want to talk about things that I think are overblown, because there are things that I see frequently that I'm just like, that's not an issue, or at least you're making it into an issue when it's not. However, there are genuine things that I think are massive issues that Wild Rift needs to fix because they just should get fixed. It's something that, you know, if you want to make a good game, which I think is the, you know, the primary aim of any developer realistically, if you want to make a good game, these are things that are preventing Wild Rift from being a good game right now. Don't get me wrong, it is a good game, but a good game. You know the difference between a good game and a good game. But you know that really, I'm gonna serious. I don't even know if I bleeped that. When I get the PowerPoint presentations out. So here we go, PowerPoint presentation. This is actually not done on PowerPoint. This is done on Photoshop. I just have all these layers, and I'm just gonna start popping. I did this all on Photoshop. Anyway. Let's talk about the first thing that needs fixing, and it is the single biggest complaint that I see in Wild Rift. And honestly, there is something that we need to understand, and there is, you know, we need to understand the concept of the matchmaking line. Like this is right down here is a very basic concept of matchmaking, right? Over here you have balanced matchmaking. Over here you have quick matchmaking. You're going to get one or the other, and Riot is usually trying to find somewhere in the middle, leaning to one side or the other to help facilitate the best possible experience for their players. Either you find matches really quickly, and they're very, very poorly balanced, or you take forever to find a match, but it ends up being relatively balanced. Right now, I don't think Wild Rift is getting this right, especially at the high levels of play. I think they unfortunately face an inherent issue where they don't have a big enough population of Diamond Plus players to be able to get this right on every single match. But I don't think the balancing of the matchmaking at high lows is as big of a problem as the queue times, the matchmaking times. You look at any Wild Rift content creator at the high levels of play, and a lot of them suffer from ridiculously long queue times. And for a mobile game, that is not ideal. But it is difficult for Riot to fix this, because if they shorten and open up the criteria to find a match, you're going to have less balanced matchmaking, and then you're probably going to have complaints at the other end of the spectrum. The biggest complaint that I see from your average ELO players is about matchmaking as well. But that feels less about matchmaking and more about frustration with the wide disparity of skill that you will find between the levels of silver and platinum. When people complain about balanced matchmaking at like gold and platinum levels, it's really because between silver and platinum, you see a huge array of skill. If you go back and watch one of my Wild Rift Doctor videos recently, you'll notice there was like a gold Gragas whose mechanics and map presence was really good. He was significantly more switched on than the majority of the players at his level, but he was in gold. You know, so that is unfortunately the problem with the lower levels. You just have such a wide array of skill that it feels like, you know, when you have really bad people on your team, that you've got bad matchmaking. When really it's actually just the player base at that level is just widely have a wide skill discrepancy, especially at the new levels of the game. The game's only been out for a few months. They're getting new players all the time. You are going to have people that just somehow get their way to gold who kind of half got there on luck, half got there getting carried, and because of the way that the fortitude system works, like it's quite easy to climb without actually being good enough to climb, especially, you know, considering the number of games that you play. With the fortitude system, better or lower than average players will climb consistently throughout those ranks if they play enough games. So there is a very wide discrepancy of skill between like silver and platinum, and that's why you'll often find people complaining about matchmaking. I saw a post on Reddit recently where there was a guy that was getting like win-loss, but he was getting MVP, SVP every game. But realistically, it's because it doesn't matter how good you are sometimes at that level, the skill discrepancies are just massive. Even in gold itself, like a gold player one gold player might be absolutely garbage. One gold player might be like on the way to Emerald, realistically. And those two players will get matched into the same game. It's just the way it is, unfortunately. And I don't think it really has anything to do with matchmaking, more so than just the wide discrepancy of skill at that level. But at the high elos, there is a problem because, you know, I'm going to talk about it now, but here's an example. This is Stuart on his Twitter. He has not been able to find a single game on his main account. The main account that he hit Challenger with in Season 2, he has not been able to find a single game on this account, and it decayed from like 250 LP Challenger to Diamond 1. That's a problem. When you've got high elo players like Leon, Doom, Stuart, unable to find a game when they queue for over an hour, something up. Like you need to figure out what has gone wrong behind the scenes, because these guys, and we talked about it before, these content creators and pro players, they are ambassadors for your game. If shit like this is going out on social media, what does it say about the game? And so that is something that, you know, I feel like is an urgent thing. It only affects a minority of players, but these players are your ambassadors and your vocal champions for the game. And so you want them to feel satisfied. I talked about it in my last video. So that is one of the big problems with matchmaking right now, and it's definitely to do with the MMR system. And speaking of the MMR system, that is something that I also want to talk about. MMR Gains. This only affects players in Diamond Plus, realistically. In fact, the Mark system and the Fortitude system is actually a really cool method that I liked actually climbing up through Emerald and Platinum. But MMR Gains are in a wacky place right now. It really only affects people in Diamond Plus, but especially once you hit Grandmaster Plus, it is demotivating. I have played like 6 games in the past week and a half because I am getting plus 14 MMR or plus 14 LP and losing 19. And my win rate is like 58% in ranked. I have a 58% win. That should not be giving me negative MMR gains. And I think the reason for it is Riot doesn't want to have people just like getting good MMR gains all the way through and just hitting like 2000 LP Challenger and never being able to get caught, because that adds another demotivating factor to the game where, you know, if someone's trying to go for rank 1 or someone's trying to go for a high rank and they enter into Challenger late in the season and they've got 2000 LP to gain, they're just going to give up, obviously. So there's swings and roundabouts to this, but the MMR gains right now just don't feel good. They feel really bad. If anything, I feel like, you know, once you get to GM, it should at least be balanced. Like, you should at least just have balanced MMR gains. You know, I should plus 13 minus 13 would be fine, but plus 13 minus 19 makes me not want to play the game. And in Challenger, it's even worse. Most challengers get plus 10 minus 20. To maintain a climb rate in Challenger, you will have to have a 66% or above win rate, which is nutty. Like, some challengers can do that, clearly. But like your average Challenger player queuing into what is supposed to be balanced matchmaking, you're expecting around 50% win rate. So naturally, people are just going to lose LP, and that feels bad. That feels bad to play, and that does often, and that cumulatively has a knock-on effect to your matchmaking. If you're making it feel bad at the high levels to play, people like myself just won't play. And then you have less players playing, and therefore matchmaking times go up and matchmaking quality gets worse. So it's a knock-on effect because, and I know from many people, and Darkbreaker has said it, MMR gains fucking suck. They really do. I've given up bleeping all my swear words now, but they really do, and it is demotivating to play. There is a reason people just keep making Smurfs, because they don't want to have to deal with the shitty MMR gains at the high level of play. And that Smurfs have a knock-on effect at ruining games at low levels. No one wants to play against the Smurf when you're in Platinum or Emerald. No one wants Darkbreaker on his 4th account, turbo-stomping kids at low elo. You know, obviously Darkbreaker's only doing that because it's so frustrating to play on his main account. But no one wants that in their low-level games. It just doesn't feel like a satisfying game experience for anybody. And Smurfs are a problem, and I hate Smurfs. I think Smurfs are a dumb thing. But people only make Smurfs because there is not a satisfying game experience at the high level of play for them, either because it takes too long to find a queue, or the matchmaking's bad, or whatever. But that really feels like a bit of a knock-on effect from the way that MMR is working at the high levels of play right now. But that's just my opinion. It obviously only affects really high-level plays, but the knock-on effects can affect low-level gamers with like Smurfs being created. Toxicity. This is a big one. I have separated out into two things that I think, you know, two groups. Toxicity that I think should have zero tolerance, and toxicity that I think that we should have some lenience with. Here is my zero tolerance, a very small list. Obviously, I might have missed some things here, but here is my zero tolerance. Win trading, zero tolerance. I recently saw Chizin put out a tweet, which I'm going to find just now for you. Give me a second. So this is a tweet by Chizin. He works for the Southeast Asian Riot team. He was basically highlighting a Chinese article that went out that talking about Chinese win traders over on the China server. This was the TLDR. First offense is a 7-day ban. Removal of season rewards revert to IM4. Repeat offender equals a permaban. They will not provide a time and date when punishment is being dished out, but will do it in multiple ways throughout the season. Good start, but I think even giving them a chance. If there is a win trader, permaban for me. Gone. Out the game. Fuck you. Like honestly, I understand the lenience a little bit. I think, that is a pretty hefty first offense punishment, but I have no tolerance for win trading. I think it should just be gone. I don't think there should be tolerance for rage quits. I think there is a difference between AFKing and rage quitting, or AFKing because of rage. I think there should be zero tolerance for rage quits, and I think that should result in some kind of punishment. And extreme toxicity, trolling, running it down mid, extreme chat toxicity. I'll talk about the differentiation between that and what I call frustration typing. But extreme toxicity in any kind of form, and repeat offense as well, should be zero tolerance. There should be zero. And that needs to be stamped out at every level of play, and that comes through the report system, and either way through just giving more active communication back to your players that what they are doing to try and reduce toxicity in their own way is working, like those report notifications when a player has been receiving punishment. Those small things really helped the league community, the league PC community, feel like they were making a difference when they were having reports, and so I think that's important. Tolerance. This is what I think should be tolerated a little bit more lightly. Playing badly. When someone plays badly, they don't deserve to be banned. People have bad games. That is how it goes. I think there is a big, and it's the same in League PC. People are quick to just jump on people who are having a bad game and call them trolls and call them playing badly and call them win trading. The amount of times I've had a bad game in High Elo and someone at the High Elo's just gone, yeah, you're win trading. And I'm like, no, I'm just having a bad game. You need to have some more tolerance to people playing badly. We all play badly, and if you think that you don't play badly, you're deluding yourself. Everyone has a bad game. Genuine AFKs. We are playing a phone game. It's frustrating when someone AFKs, and they probably should receive a light punishment, but they do not deserve to get absolutely banned. I've had 2 games recently. There was a high elo player from Tribe whose game just crashed and wouldn't load back in. I wasn't mad. It happens. And there was a game where my Ezreal Lady carry got a phone call, an important business phone call. He wasn't expecting it early, had to pick it up and had to go AFK. We're playing a phone game, and I think you have to realize that it's a competitive phone game, and of course you should always make sure that you have the time to complete a match of Wild Rift. But you also have to understand that our phones don't just exist for gaming. No one has a phone that is solely dedicated to gaming, and things happen on phones that can unfortunately impact the way that you play. So you have to realize that we're a phone game, and AFKs will happen, and sometimes they're genuine, and we have to give the benefit of the doubt to people. When I don't give the benefit of doubt is when someone's been playing 15 minutes and decide to just go AFK, or someone plays 5 minutes, types in chat, all right, I'm going AFK, and then just goes AFK, right? That's what I don't agree with. And frustration typing. I think there is a line, and I think Hells might have crossed the line even in party chat on his video, but he knows that wasn't the ideal thing. But he was frustrated, and I think there is an element of frustration typing that should not be considered toxicity. Sometimes I will type in chat when someone is playing bad or they're trolling, and I'll just say stop being a dick or something like that, or like I'll type something out of frustration. I don't like to do it, and I am trying to train myself not to, but I think that there is an element of frustration typing that we should give some leeway to. It's a competitive game, and in every competitive game, people voice their frustrations. It is obviously you just don't want to go down the extreme toxicity path. I think calling people monkeys and dogs is not the way forward. But I think if you say, look, can you just concentrate properly, or oh, for fuck's sake, you're playing really stupidly, that's just frustration typing. And that happens in a competitive game. It happens in any competitive game that isn't just Wild Rift. Right, yeah, I've done that one. Latency. This is something that sparked... I made a Reddit post about this video, and this is something that sparked quite an interesting debate. Right. Small impact, VPN usage. I genuinely believe that VPN usage affecting latency affects a small number of games. like I said, it does more readily affect high-level players because they're more likely to queue into the same person. So if you queue into someone, I've had this happen, especially at low player base times on the European server. Queue up for a game, I get someone that's obviously using a VPN on our team or the enemy team, and it ruins the game and gives everyone 150 MS. Second game, because we're high elo, we queue into them again. And we get that repeat experience over and over again. That's what I mean when I say it affects high elos more. The player base is lower, so if someone in that player base is using a VPN, it's much more likely to affect people on a regular basis. That's not to say it doesn't affect low elo, because VPN usage can definitely apply to every single level. But because the player bases are wider, and in general, people are not using VPNs regularly, you're less likely to queue into it consistently. I did see Darkbreaker said that he made a smurf, and like every second game he was queuing into a VPN user. I'd be interested to know from a Riot perspective whether that is a regular occurrence and whether they have an idea about how many people are using VPNs. But something that I do think is important, and I think Darkbreaker made a really good point here. When you play PUBG Mobile, they seem to have like a way of detecting VPNs and especially like detecting emulators as well. I wonder if Riot has the way to detect VPN usage. Maybe that's something that can be used, because if there is a way to detect VPN usage, I would just not let people play using a VPN, because I think it ruins the experience for everyone involved. Or if you're using a VPN and you're trying to route to another server, make sure that the server is placed on, or the server is placed closest to the number of people that that have the close proximity to that server. I don't know. Maybe there's a routing thing that can be done to help VPNs, but I think it's a relatively small impact latency. What is high impact, however, is server placement, infrastructure, routing, and some of the LTE Wi-Fi options that Riot has been working on. These are things that do affect latency in the game. It was one of the biggest things that plagued Vainglory. Their routing and their infrastructure in the Southeast Asian region was absolutely awful. Like, Australian players could not get a game without having like 110 MS. And they did not have good server infrastructure in Southeast Asia. And this is something that might be affecting Riot, and it's probably something they're looking to work on. They had to create a whole new set of server infrastructure for North America. It might be that they have to do the same thing for India, for instance, before launching there. So that, these are all actual genuine issues that affect latency that Riot can work on and Riot can sort out. I'm hoping VPN usage has got a relatively easy fix, but you would think if it had an easy fix, it would have been done by now. But I also think it's probably low impact, which is why it's not been seeing a huge amount of attention. Right, communication. I actually think in general, Wild Rift devs have been fairly communicative. I think they were really communicative in the launch up to NA, and since people like JCM have left the company, we have seen less of the dev-player interaction. I think something that you have to be aware of is that as a game developer, there is this expectation that you are going to make yourself available for your community at all times. And JCM did that. He was, and a good example of that is someone that is Mortdog from TFT. If you know Mortdog from TFT, he is someone that makes himself available pretty much all the time. But that has personal impact on the dev. They don't get the time outside of work. How many of you want to go home from work at 5 p.m. and think, I can't wait for an evening full of more work? Devs need time to switch off too. And I think that's important and something we should all respect. Developers they work in high pressure environments. They have lots of targets to meet. They don't want to go home and continue to have to work. Devs need to switch off too. However, what I would encourage from developers, and I love it when I see this, is if you are up for informal communication through your social media channels because you have a shared passion of the game, do it. It means all the more for players. And I think that informal communication gets amplified through content creation. If someone puts a tweet chain out, I saw recently that I think someone called Maddie from Riot talked about how much she really cares about the game and why sometimes things aren't communicated. And that got amplified to Reddit. It got amplified to some videos. Those kind of things will get amplified. And I know there is strict guidelines with corporate communication about what should and shouldn't be said. But just giving devs some freedom and having confidence in your devs to just communicate the right things and not have to police and vet everything that goes out on their personal channels. It can help create a closer sense of communication between the dev team and the community. But But otherwise, I think communication, from even, you know, from a general standpoint, Riot still are leaps and bounds above most of the companies when it comes to communicating with their audiences. Wild Rift has felt a little slow recently. I will give you that. I think their communication has been a little lacking, but it has been good through the majority of the life cycle. And I'm hoping that they get more opportunity to interact the way that Maddie did and just have some more personal level interactions. JCM was absolutely brilliant at this, but again, he also gave a lot of himself to the game, which is obviously, you know, something that not every developer wants to do because they have personal lives. They have their own lives too. And that is important to remember. A dev is not a dev 24/7. A dev is a dev during their game, during their work hours. And outside of their work hours, they are just, you know, a person like you and I. And we need to respect that. And I think the gaming industry needs to respect that. It really does. I think there was a big problem with gamers believing that they have an entitlement to sort of entitled access to developers when really they just want to, you know, they'll do it during work hours and then they want to go home and enjoy their lives like normal people. But I think, you know, official communication from Wild Rift devs could have been a little bit better in the recent months. Maybe they didn't feel like they had anything to communicate on, but even just like small updates on where Wild Rift is going, what the overall goals for Wild Rift are, those things help give confidence to the player base, and that's nice, and that helps keep players engaged. This is a question that's been thrown up a lot. Is Wild Rift casual enough? It's an interesting question, isn't it? Mobile Legends is the simplest form of mobile MOBA, and you know, Mobile Legends does a lot to appeal to a casual audience base. I think the question is like, what's the value proposition for Wild Rift over Mobile Legends, especially when it gets to the point where Wild Rift is trying to compete for that audience more readily. You know, do you lose something unique? Do you lose a unique value by dumbing down Wild Rift to a point where the games are quicker and because there is a real scale here, right? Games are quicker. You feel like you have less agency as a player because one thing goes wrong and it can snowball the game and it's very difficult to come back from. Games are too long and it's way too long for a mobile platform and no one's going to want to play it because you just don't have time. And why would you play Wild Rift over PC League if there is not that extreme difference in terms of the way that the games are played out? So it's striking a balance. And I think Wild Rift is, the length of the games are fine because I think, you know, you need to offer something over AoV and Mobile Legends. I believe the average game time in Mobile Legends is much shorter than the average game time in Wild Rift because Wild Rift is trying to offer a highly competitive, deeper experience. Now, you can argue whether that's the right thing for the mobile audience or not, but you need, you know, I don't know how well Wild Rift would have succeeded by just coming in and being like, yeah, same length as Mobile Legends, same dumbed down. You know, you lose, I think, like the agency of an individual player if you shorten the game, you know. But you know, that's something that I think is up for debate in the community right now, and that's not something that I think is absolutely settled. Things like ARAM and casual game modes and rotating game modes and fun game modes, those are brilliant. I want Wild Rift to incorporate some more of like the one for all game modes, you know, the Super Earth game modes, you know, the new one that they've just brought out. I can't remember the name of it, where you can just like have 3 ultimates or something. Like those, if the coding is capable of doing so, those are game modes that are just going to be so much fun, and that is good. ARAM style content for the casual player base is good, and we need more of it. And I think that we need more of it before Wild Rift decides to compete on a wider market, because those are pools that are great for casual audiences. Balance. It's a red herring, honestly. I talked about this in my last video. I think balance in Wild Rift is good. I genuinely do. There have been a few obnoxious examples of champions that have been ridiculous. Of course, there always will be in MOBAs. MOBAs are extremely hard to balance and will always be extremely hard to balance. But Wild Rift has a 2-weekly balance update cycle, and they usually always try to hit the nail on the head. There have definitely been some balance patches where I've been like, why have you not nerfed this champion? But, you know, I do sometimes think they're a little I do sometimes think they're a little tentative. They're a little bit hesitant to act on things that should be acted on. But in general, the balance in Wild Rift is pretty good, and MOBAs are notorious for bad balancing. You cannot tell me that you can go to AoV and Mobile Legends and say that the balancing is better than Wild Rift, or, you know, I think that if anything, they're probably the same, or if not, they're a little worse. Riot have got good balance in Wild Rift. The mid lane right now has so many viable champions. I think the balancing is relatively solid in Wild Rift, and it's a red herring when people complain about it, because it is I think in general in a good place. And finally, marketing. Firstly, and this is just my personal opinion, I don't believe that we as players have the right to understand marketing strategy from the developer. We don't have the right to ask about marketing strategy from a developer. Firstly, they will never bloody tell you, because if they tell you, they're telling their competitors. So of course, they are never going to talk about their marketing strategy, because what's the point? Like, you will never ever hear a corporate body talk about its marketing strategy until it's a marketing campaign that's already done and they're talking about how well it went, or sometimes talking about how it didn't do so well. So an active marketing strategy you will never get to hear about, because obviously you don't want to tell your competitors about it. It's basic sense. Whether Wild Rift should advertise or not really comes down to whether you think Wild Rift is in a good enough state to advertise or not. You know, I think there is a big split in opinion. There is an opinion that Wild Rift should just get more players in because that will improve the quality, and I think to an extent that will solve some issues. Getting more players in will solve the issues maybe around matchmaking and that kind of stuff. But obviously new players always have to take time to grind up to the high levels of play, so that still won't fix challenger level stuff instantly. The other question is, and I talked about it in my previous video, does Wild Rift offer a unique enough value proposition when you want to market to a wider audience, when you're trying to market to the mobile MOBA audience and not just trying to appeal to new players or PC converts? Because that's what I believe Wild Rift has been doing. I don't know, but I believe Wild Rift has been going PC converts, new players, because those are the ones that we think we can capture with our brand, you know, with the League ecosystem, with the brand, because as I said before, I don't think the League brand is a strong enough individual pull to get people away from things like AoV and Mobile Legends. We talked about it in the previous video. Go and watch it. Very interesting. The other side of the coin is, do you think Wild Rift has enough in the game right now to entice people to want to pick it up? And that's the thing, right? You know, do you? That's an honest question. Do you guys in the comments think that Wild Rift has got enough content, features, etc. in the game right now where you would be happy saying, throw it out there, lads, let's just start advertising this? Question. That is a question, isn't it? And that's something that, you know, at the end of the day, we won't know until Riot decide to either talk about it or do it. And even if they do it, we're probably not going to hear about it until ever. We might not ever hear about it, because we don't deserve to hear about it. It's not our we don't have the God-given right to hear about a company's marketing strategies, because no company will ever tell you a marketing strategy, because again, as I said before, competitors, and we shouldn't really have the right to hear about it at the end of the day. And I think lastly, this plague of gamers' obsessions with, is a game dying, when they are pointing out things that maybe don't have an impact on the game, or you know, maybe don't have an impact on the health of the game on the wide scale. I hate this obsession with games dying. Just enjoy the game. You don't have to care about whether it's doing well or not. Just enjoy the game. If you're having fun, have fun. End of story, guys. End of story. There we go. TED Talk over. Boom. Thank you very much. I hope I covered a lot of the issues. If you saw anything that I didn't cover and you want to talk about it in the comments, please do. That would be really cool. And I'll hopefully join in on the discussion. I'll see you soon.